The clock on the wall of my hospital room was a silent tyrant. It ticked away the seconds, minutes, and hours of a life I was slowly realizing had been a carefully constructed illusion. Eleanor Vance, at the age of 68, was staring at the flacking paint on the ceiling of St. Jude's, a hospital in the heart of Bristol, and feeling the cold, hard truth of loneliness settle into my bones. The surgery had been a success, a routine hip replacement, the surgeon had assured me with a practiced smile. But the aftermath, the quiet, desperate aftermath, was a far more treacherous operation. Before the anesthetic had even fully worn off, my 4 children had been a flurry of activity around my bed. There was Thomas, the eldest, a corporate lawyer with a permanent furrow between his brows, a man who spoke in contracts and clauses. He had held my hand, his grip firm and possessive. "Don't you worry, Mum. We've got it all sorted. Rhoda, we're going to look after you. You won't be alone for a single minute." Then came Catherine, my only daughter, a successful architect with a taste for minimalist design and a husband who was always in a meeting. She had been fussing with the get-well-soon balloons, her voice a symphony of efficiency. "I've taken the first week off, Mum. Absolutely. And then the others will take over. It's all planned. You just rest." My youngest, James, a free-spirited musician with a shock of unruly red hair, had promised to bring his guitar and play me my favorite songs. And then there was Michael, the middle child, a perpetually anxious man who worked in finance, who had nodded along, mumbling something about taking time off from his spreadsheets. Their words were a warm blanket, a promise of comfort, a shield against the terrifying vulnerability of being old and broken. That was 7 days ago. They had all left on that first day, a squadron of love and good intentions, their promises echoing in the sterile air. Thomas had a deposition he couldn't miss. Catherine's husband, Mark, had a work crisis and needed her. James had a gig in Manchester. Michael had a quarterly report due. It was just for a few hours, they'd said. They'd be back. The first day alone, I told myself it was just a blip. They were busy. They were my successful, wonderful children. The nurse, a kindly woman named Brenda, had brought me my lunch, a tasteless beige puree, and had chatted cheerfully. It was a thin comfort. I found myself craning my neck, looking at the door, listening for the familiar scuffle of footsteps. My eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but I refused to close them, terrified I might miss them. The second day, the silence was a tangible weight. The only sounds were the intermittent beeping of the machines, the distant squeak of a trolley, and the low murmur of the night staff. My phone, which I had charged meticulously, sat silently on the bedside table. I sent a group text, "Good morning, my loves, how is everyone?" The response was a cascade of single words, emojis, and excuses. Thomas, swamped. Catherine, XX. James, a guitar emoji. Michael, work. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. By the third day, the pain was a dull, persistent ache in my hip, but it was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest. The television was on, a perky morning show host extolling the virtues of a new cleaning product. I couldn't focus. My mind was a hamster wheel of doubt and self-flagellation. Had I been a bad mother? Had I not given them enough? Was this some kind of cosmic punishment for the times I'd been too busy, too tired, too focused on just getting through the day? On the fourth day, my new reality began to set in. I started to notice the small things. The way the nurse would put my water glass just out of reach so I would have to press the buzzer and ask. The way the food arrived cold. The way the cleaning lady would come in, not making eye contact and mopping around the trail of my own shattered dignity. I was becoming a fixture, a problem to be managed, a name on a chart. The night of the fourth day, I woke with a start. The room was dark save for the dim glow of the monitors. A figure was standing in the doorway. For a glorious, heart-stopping second, my heart soared. It was Thomas. He'd come, my hero, but the figure didn't approach. It was just a shadow cast by the moonlight. I was hallucinating. I wept then silently, the tears soaking my pillow, a silent tribute to my own foolishness. The fifth day brought the first crack in my composure. A young doctor, a resident with kind eyes, came to check my wound. He was polite, professional, but as he was leaving he said, "Your daughters are so lucky to have you, Mrs. Vance. The nurses were just saying what a dedicated bunch you must have. The one that's been here the last few nights, she's been so worried." He smiled and left. I froze. Daughters. I only had one daughter. The one that was in London with her husband. I didn't correct him. I couldn't. My mouth was dry. My brain started to churn. Who was he talking about? A creeping suspicion began to root itself in my mind. On the sixth day I saw her. I was struggling to get to the bathroom, my legs screaming in protest. I was leaning heavily on my walker, my body a symphony of aches. A young woman, a nurse I hadn't seen before, was standing at the nurse's station, her back to me. Her hair was the same rich brown as Catherine, and she had the same straight posture. For a second the world tilted. "Catherine," I croaked. She didn't turn. She just laughed at something the other nurse said and walked away. The seventh day I felt a surge of anger. It was a hot, righteous anger that burned away the shame and the sadness. How dare they? How dare they abandon me like this, like a forgotten package in a lost and found? Their promises were not just broken, they were a mockery. On my bedside table was a photo of them all, a family portrait taken at Catherine's wedding. They looked so happy, so united, a perfect family. I snatched the frame and shoved it into my drawer, unable to bear the sight of their smiling, deceitful faces. That afternoon I had a visitor. It wasn't one of my children, but a chaplain, a gentle old man named Father O'Malley. He sat with me, not saying much, just offering a quiet presence. He looked at the empty room, at the untouched gift basket, and then at me. He didn't need to say anything. He just squeezed my hand, and I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I was a stranger to my own life, a ghost haunting a room in a hospital. The eighth day, the nurse, Brenda, came in with a small bouquet of daisies. "These are for you, Mrs. Vance. They're from your children." I took the flowers. The cellophane was crinkled. I knew it was a lie. The florist's tag was still on it, paid for by a credit card with a name I'd never heard. They hadn't even had the decency to deliver them themselves. I didn't even have the energy to be angry anymore. I was just hollow. On the ninth day, I finally found the courage to call Catherine. She answered on the second ring. "Mum, how are you? I've been so worried." Her voice was a flood of false concern. "When are you coming, Catherine?" I asked, my voice thin and reedy. "Oh, Mum, I told you. Mark has that presentation with the investors. I can't possibly leave him now. It's the biggest deal of his career. He's under so much pressure. You understand, don't you?" "I'm in pain," I said, my voice cracking. It was the first time I had admitted it. "I know, Mum, it's so hard, but the doctors say you're doing great. And the nurses are wonderful, aren't they? Just try to be brave. We'll all be there on Saturday. It's a family day, I promise. Mark and I will come, and the kids. It'll be a real party," she laughed, a brittle, artificial sound. I didn't have the strength to argue. I just said, "All right, darling," and hung up. A family day, a party, in a hospital room. The irony was a bitter pill. On the 10th day, Thomas called. He was in the middle of a deposition, he said. He just wanted to hear my voice. He told me he was proud of me. He said I was stronger than all of them. He said it would all be okay. His words were just more empty platitudes, noise to fill the dead air. That night I had a dream. I was at a dinner table, a beautiful mahogany table laden with food. My children were all there, their faces glowing with love. They were toasting me, telling me how much they loved me. I felt a wave of warmth, of belonging. Then the scene shifted. I was sitting alone at the table. The food was gone. The children were gone. Only the empty chairs remained. I woke up with a scream lodged in my throat. The 11th day was a turning point. I had a session with the physiotherapist. It was brutal. My muscles screamed in protest. I felt weak and pathetic. But for the first time, I didn't just feel sorry for myself. I felt a flicker of something else. Determination. If my children weren't going to be here to help me, then I would help myself. The physiotherapist, a young woman named Sarah, was impressed. "You're a fighter, Mrs. Vance," she said. "I can see it in your eyes." For the first time in 11 days, I smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was a start. On the 12th day, I began to plot. I started to put my affairs in order. I wrote a letter. It was a long, rambling thing full of accusations and hurt. I poured all my bitterness onto the page. I talked about the birth of each of them, the sleepless nights, the endless sacrifices, the love I had poured into them. And I talked about the silence of the last 12 days. I wrote how I had felt, truly felt, the loneliness, the abandonment, the creeping sense of my own invisibility. I didn't know if I'd ever send it, but writing it was a catharsis. The 13th day, I woke up feeling different. The anger had subsided. In its place was a profound sadness, but also a strange clarity. The birds were singing outside my window. It was a beautiful day. For the first time, I pushed myself out of bed and walked painfully over to the window. I looked out at the car park, the city beyond, the distant green hills. Life was going on. The world hadn't stopped for my children's neglect. It was a sobering thought. The 14th day, the nurse told me I was being discharged the next day. "Do you have someone to pick you up, Mrs. Vance?" she asked. I opened my mouth to say, "My children are coming," but the words wouldn't come. The lie tasted like ash. I just nodded. "Yes," I said, "I'll be fine." I called my children one by one. Each call was the same, a quick, disembodied voice full of apologies and promises. "Can't make it, Mum. I'll try, Mum." "Something, come up, Mum." I didn't fight, I didn't argue. I just listened to the hollow sounds of their voices and felt a piece of my heart chip away with each one. I was a stranger to them, a ghost in their busy lives. I had become an obligation, a box to be ticked. On the 15th day, my discharge was official. I was dressed in my own clothes, a simple floral dress that felt strangely foreign. I sat on the edge of the bed, my small suitcase packed. I felt like a prisoner about to be released into a world I no longer understood. Brenda came in and gave me a hug. "You take care, Mrs. Vance," she said, her eyes glistening. "You're a strong woman. You'll be all right." Then the door to my room opened. My heart stopped. It was Thomas. He was in his expensive suit, looking flustered and uncomfortable. "Mum," he exclaimed, rushing towards me. "I'm so sorry, the deposition finished early. I came as fast as I could. Are you ready?" He looked at my small suitcase, at my pale face, at the emptiness of the room. I looked at my eldest son, the man I had breastfed, the boy I had taken to football practice, the teenager I had argued with about his curfew. I saw in his eyes not my son, but a stranger, a man who had been too busy with his depositions and his contracts to visit his mother, a man who was here now only to manage the logistics of my discharge. "Where are the others?" I asked, my voice flat. "They'll meet us at your house, Mum," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Catherine's coming down from London. James is on his way. Michael will be there soon. It was all a mix-up, you see. We got our wires crossed." He was lying. Of course he was lying. They had all arranged to meet at my house to make themselves look good, to sanitize the situation for the neighbors, to put on a show of familial devotion. I was just a prop in their performance. As Thomas helped me into the taxi, I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. The 15 days of silence had been a wound, but this performance they were about to put on was the salt being rubbed into it. I was going to confront them. I had to, but the prospect terrified me more than any surgery ever could. The car ride home was silent. Thomas was on his phone, sending emails, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't speak to me. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He was just completing a task. We pulled into the driveway of my modest house, a place that had once been a sanctuary. The flowers in my front garden were wilting. The lawn was overgrown. It looked abandoned, unloved, just like me. The door swung open. My other 3 children were there, arranged in the living room like guests at a funeral. Catherine, impeccably dressed, her face a mask of strained cheerfulness. James, his guitar propped against the sofa, looking sheepish. And Michael, hovering anxiously by the fireplace. They all rushed towards me, a chorus of "Mum," and "We're so glad you're home," and "Are you okay?" They surrounded me, hugging me, their arms around me. But their touch felt hollow. I could feel their eyes on each other, checking to see if they were performing their roles well enough. They were actors in a play, and I was the unwitting audience. I managed to extricate myself from their grip and hobbled over to my favorite armchair. the one my late husband, John, had always sat in. I lowered myself into it, the familiar fabric offering a small measure of comfort. "Mum, you look wonderful," Catherine beamed. "The rest did you good." 15 days, Catherine, I said, my voice low. 15 days I spent alone in that hospital room. Her smile faltered. "Well, you know, Mum, it was a mix-up. We were all so busy, but we're here now. That's what matters." I looked at each of them. Thomas, the lawyer who had a legal defense for everything. Catherine, the architect who could build beautiful excuses. James, the musician who could write a song to explain away anything. And Michael, the accountant, who could balance a ledger of neglect. Was it a mix-up, I asked, my voice trembling, or was it a choice? Thomas cleared his throat. "Now, Mum, let's not get emotional. We've all come here to help you. We're your family." "What family?" I whispered. Where was my family when I was lying in that bed in agony? Where was my family when the only sound I heard was the beeping of a machine? Where was my family when I was crying myself to sleep? Catherine's eyes flashed. "You're being dramatic, Mum. We all have lives. We can't just drop everything." "You're right, Catherine. You can't drop everything," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "But you could have tried. You could have tried to be there for me, just for a moment. A single moment to show me that I mattered." "You're not the only one who has needs, Mother," Thomas said, his voice tight. "Our lives don't revolve around you." The words hung in the air, a slap in the face. It was the first time the mask had truly slipped. I saw the resentment in his eyes, the burden I had become. I looked down at my hands, the hands that had changed their diapers, had cooked their meals, had held them when they were sick, the hands that had built their lives. And now, those same hands were trembling with a mixture of pain and a dawning realization. I was done. I was done being a victim. "I'm not going to fight with you," I said, my voice calm. "I'm too tired." James stepped forward. "Mum, I'm sorry. I was selfish. I am sorry." I looked at him, the youngest, the one I had always spoiled. "It's not an apology I need, James. It's a change." Michael, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. "What do you mean, a change?" I took a deep breath. The weight of the last 15 days pressed down on me, but I felt a surge of strength I didn't know I possessed. I was no longer the fragile woman in the hospital bed. I was the mother who had survived 15 days of abandonment, and I was ready to fight for myself. "I'm selling the house," I announced. "I'm moving to a retirement community." The room fell silent. The shock on their faces was a strange kind of satisfaction. Catherine's mouth fell open. Thomas looked like he'd been slapped. "Selling the house," Thomas repeated, his voice incredulous. "But Mum, this is our home, the house we grew up in." "It was my home, Thomas," I said, my voice firm. "It was my home, but it's not mine anymore. I'm not going to stay in a place that holds memories of a family that doesn't exist anymore." I could feel the tears threatening to spill over, but I held them back. "The house is being put on the market on Monday." "You can't do that," Catherine shrieked. "What about the grandchildren? Where will we stay when we come to visit?" "You haven't visited in years, Catherine," I said, the truth finally leaving my lips. "You all haven't. You sent flowers, you called, you texted, but you never came, not really." I looked at each one of them in turn, seeing their own guilt mirrored in their eyes. "This isn't about the house. It's about the fact that I was alone for 15 days. My children promised to be there for me, and they were. I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for a phone call that will never come, waiting for someone to care." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I had said my piece. I had finally spoken the truth I had been holding inside for so long. I had stopped being their mother and had become their burden. I had to stop being a prop in their lives and start being the protagonist of my own. I didn't wait for them to respond. I couldn't. I got up, ignoring the sharp pain in my hip, and walked towards the stairs. I had to go to my room, to my sanctuary, to have a quiet cry. But as I reached the first step, I felt a hand on my arm. It was James. His eyes were wet with tears. "Mum," he whispered, "I'm sorry." For a moment I almost softened. I almost forgave him. But then I saw Thomas and Catherine and Michael standing in the living room, looking like statues, and I remembered. I remembered the silence of my hospital room. I remembered the cold food, the beeping machines, the crushing loneliness. I gently pulled my arm free. "I'm going to rest now," I said. "I'm tired, please don't disturb me." I climbed the stairs, each step a small victory, each step a declaration of my own independence. The tears were flowing freely now. I was not crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was free. For the first time in 15 days, I felt a sense of purpose. I was going to start over. I was going to reclaim my life, not as a mother who had been cast aside, but as a woman who had finally learned to value herself. As I lay down on my bed, I looked at the ceiling of my bedroom, the one I had shared with John for 40 years. It was the same ceiling, but everything looked different. The cracks in the plaster seemed less ominous, the peeling paint less sad. They were just marks of time, marks of a life lived. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had been given a second chance. Not a chance to be a better mother, that ship had sailed, but a chance to be a better version of myself. A chance to live for me. My children's betrayal had been a gift, a painful, brutal gift that had finally shattered the illusion I had been clinging to. The illusion that I was still the center of their world. I was, and that was okay, because I was about to become the center of my own. And this time I was not going to abandon myself.